big story that we have for you is the latest as far as a controversy over consent is concerned. The centre has firmly opposed lowering the age of consent from 18 to 16 years, telling the Supreme Court that the current threshold is essential to protect minors from sexual abuse. In fact, in its written submission, the government argued that any dilution under the POCSO Act, even to accommodate adolescent relationships, will weaken the law's protective framework and potentially open the door to child abuse. However, the centre acknowledged that judicial discretion can be exercised on a case-to-case basis in matters involving consensual adolescent relationships. Now, this response came after petitioner Nipun Saxena urged the court to reinterpret the age of consent. In fact, pointing out that it had remained 16 for nearly 80 years before being raised to 18 in the year 2012. The petition also highlighted a rise in criminal cases involving couples aged between 16 and 18, calling for a more nuanced legal approach. That's the latest that we have for you. Let me go across to my colleague Harish, who is joining us on the phone line for more on this. Harish, good afternoon. Can you put things in perspective for our viewers as far as this particular case is concerned, because this has ignited a new debate in the society?
Yes, that's right, Heena. A very significant stand taken by the Modi government. In fact, the age of consent for sex must remain 18. This is what Centre has told Supreme Court in the written submission. The government has told Supreme Court that the age of consent for sex cannot be lowered from 18 years as it is meant to protect minors from sexual abuse. But as you rightly said, the government has considered that judges should be given discretion. They have the judicial discretion on a case-to-case basis in instances of adolescent, romantic and physical relationships. The centre has opposed any move to lower the age of consent under the Protection of Children from Sexual Offences, that is POCSO Act, or introduce exceptions for adolescent relationships, telling the Supreme Court that such dilution, even in the name of reform or adolescent autonomy, would dismantle the statutory shield meant to safeguard minors and risk opening the doors to child abuse. The centre's categorical stand assumes significance, Heena, because amid a deluge of cases where courts are increasingly confronted with situations involving consensual relationships between adolescents, often leading to the prosecution of young boys under POCSO, even when the alleged victim does not complain of coercion or exploitation. And this submission of the centre came in the case where Advocate Nipun Saxena had requested the Supreme Court to interpret the provision of age of consent, which had remained 16 years for the last 80 years and was only changed in 2012. In fact, the petition said, as a result, there is a sporadic rise in criminal cases being registered against couples who are romantically involved and fall within bracket of 16 to 18 years, since the law as it stands today says the girls are incapable of giving consent if they're under 18 years of age. That has resulted in a problem of young adults being prosecuted under very stringent laws like POCSO. So till 2012, he says it remained till 16 as 16 and it should be retained as 16. This is a petition filed in 2012, Heena, and this development has come in this 13-year-old PIF. Back to you.
All right, Harish. Thank you very much for the moment for joining us and putting things in perspective for our viewers. Let me take these points across to our guests who are joining us on the broadcast this afternoon. We have Kapil Sankhla, who is a lawyer in the Supreme Court. We also have with us Abha Singh, who is a lawyer and an activist. Good afternoon to both of you. First, before we get into the points that have been made by the centre in this particular case, what the centre has told Supreme Court, I want to ask both of you, because you both are experts on the subject. You understand laws very well, and I want to ask you, what is your opinion? Should the age of consent be lowered in this country? Should it be below 18 years or it should remain at 18 years? Let's begin with you, Abha Singh.
No, Heena, in my view, and I think all the cases and my experience as a lawyer, I would say age of consent should be 16. For so many years it was 16. only when the Criminal Law Amendment Act came and where POCSO definition of 2D was made, that a definition of child is 18 years, that time we raised it to 18. And that has created a havoc in the society. Today, when we are in a permissive society, the Western world, so much of digital media, children are having voluntary consensual sex. And I have seen in cases which I have gone to Dongri shelter home and all that, these young kids who've had physical relationship with their classmates and mostly standard 11th and 12th, they are languishing in the jail being termed as rapists. And let me tell you, these teenage loves which are now being branded as rape, I think it is demoralizing the society, making criminals out of teenage love, and it is high time that it is reduced back to 16.
Okay, so you think it should be lowered from 18 to 16. What about you, Mr. Kapil Sankhla? Where do you stand?
Well, I've been a criminal lawyer for more than 25 years. I have a lot of respect for Abha. But I don't really agree to this because I've actually done these kind of matters over the years, and it's very unfortunate. The moment we actually reduce the age, we actually play to other kind of arguments where, there are issues pertaining to pedophiles. There are pertaining to people who are giving consent to pressure sex, where minors are usually involved. And this is classmates pressurizing other classmates. You have situation where there is somebody in dominant position also trying to justify it. Long time back, in fact, the consensual age was 10. It was subsequently increased to 16 and then 18. And I think it is absolutely right. And this is exactly what the center is also saying when they say that it can be dealt on a case-to-case basis. Abha would agree that even in other developed countries where the age is less, you have something called a Romeo-Juliet clause, where you see the quasi-quasi what is the age gap between the boy and the girl, and all of those other things, whether there is a position of power, domination, etc., whether the child understands what he's getting into, and all of those things. To clarify at this stage, when the government says that the judiciary has the authority and the right to see it on a case-to-case basis, I think that would be an appropriate thing, because we cannot have a one-shoe-fit-all order where, you say, okay, reduce it, and then we will see what happens, because that is actually going to increase the criminal activities, etc. There are various other countries where, in fact, the ages have increased, or there are now protective mechanisms. And we're talking about countries like Germany, countries like Thailand, etc., where sex is supposed to be very permissible. And lastly, importantly, even the argument made by the other side, by Mrs. Jai Singh, was that the consensual age must be increased because it ignores autonomy, maturity, and capacity to consent. Now, please see these three tests. You are having an elitist argument sitting in Delhi, Mumbai, etc., while we forget that most of India is a village. And cities are India is basically many villages surrounded by some cities. And we actually look at the entire world and the entire community as city people. What you do not realize is that in villages, there is no capacity of autonomy or maturity or capacity to consent. There is issues pertaining to caste, color, creed, pertaining to, dominant position, rich versus poor. And you're opening floodgates of, misuse of the law once you reduce the age, because there would be a child who would not be in the capacity to actually deny or question the authority that has perpetrated any crime against her.
Okay, I think you've raised some very interesting points, and I would like Ms. Abha Singh to respond to the specific points you've made. One of them, of course, being that there is a risk of manipulation and coercion. And the point that he made about, how there is a potential of misuse that also exists. So why should, there be this blanket change, of really bringing it down from 18 to 16? How will you like to respond to these points that were made by Mr. Kapil Sankhla, Ms. Abha Singh?
Yeah, I don't agree to this logic at all, that because it will be misused, so there should be no law. If you see 498A, continuously people have been saying that this law is being misused, so it should be removed. In fact, you had a movement called Men Against Violence. But my question is, even today, more than 6,000 brides are burnt. Dowry deaths we have in this country. So you cannot say that law is being misused. You have to see the parameter that in today's time, when it is a permissive society where children, in fact, my learned friend may not have seen that case, but I have seen that when these kids have eloped who are in school, and then under the pressure of the parents, the girl comes and files a case of rape. Charges of abduction are also put on these young kids who are 17, 18. And the POCSO Act is so strong that it is a judge's dilemma, even if the judge can see, because in the POCSO Act, it is the onus of being proved that you are innocent is on the accused, not the 17-year-old. How will he prove that he is innocent? Till that time, he is already put behind bars. The judges do not have any discretion. So it is POCSO Act is such a strong law that 16 to 18, and in fact, Supreme Court a couple of times has said that we cannot term consensual sex, which is voluntary, as rape. So I think it is definitely required that we look into it seriously. And at the time also when Nipun Saxena case happened and Criminal Amendment Act 2013 was implemented, even at that time people said, let us not make it from 16 to 18. You may have age of marriage 18, you may have age of marriage 21, no problem. But consensual sex, because if you do it on one-to-one basis, by that time that little child would have been in jail for so many months, and the way they are sexually assaulted because they are termed as rapists. People have not seen that. You know, these kid romances being termed as rapists in shelter homes, they are brutally assaulted.
Okay, those are again some very pertinent points you've raised. I'll get Mr. Sankhla to respond to those. But before that, let's also tell our viewers a little bit about the pros and cons here. The question really is, should teen relations be decriminalized? And let's tell you first, the pros here. In fact, many who are in favor say that it protects consensual relations. Those who are against it, in fact, are of the view that there is a risk of manipulation and coercion that is involved. Those who support it seem to suggest that it reduces the misuse of stringent laws, as Abha Singh was also mentioning. But at the same time, those against it are of the view that there is a potential risk of teen pregnancies, and that's something that we cannot also ignore. Again, those in favor are of the view that this saves teens from legal proceedings. Again, the point that Ms. Abha Singh was mentioning and was explaining to our viewers. Then those against it are of the view that there are major challenges when it comes to implementation. And before I go back to my guest, I also want to show you how the situation is in other parts of the world. Because like in India, we have the age, the age of consent remains at 18. There are other countries which have it, slightly different. For example, in the United States of America, the age of consent is between 16 to 18. For United Kingdom, it is at 16. Canada, 16 again. In Australia, it's even lower, 15 to 16. In France also, it's much lower at 15. Here we are discussing whether it should be brought down from 18 to 16. But you've got countries like France where it is at 15. And in Germany, it's even lower at 14. So this is how the situation is in different parts of the world. Let me now go back to my guests who continue to be with us at this point in time. And Mr. Sankhla, now I was just explaining to our viewers the pros and cons here. Of course, there is a possibility that it can be misused, but then times are changing. Shouldn't the society also, change? Shouldn't the laws also change with time? And given the fact that for about 80 long years in this country only, the age of consent remained at 16.
You're absolutely right. But can I just tell you something more that your data perhaps was unable to show, and which is this. When we talk about Japan, yes, the different states in Japan have different ages of consent, but the Child Welfare Act forbids fornication with a child under 18 years of age. When you talk about Germany, yes, 14 years is the age of consent, but sexual activity with a person under 18 is punishable if adult is the person of authority over the minor, taking care of his education, care, employment, etc. When you talk about Mexico, the age of consent is 17 years. When you talk about South Korea, the age of consent is 20 years. Canada is between 14 to 16, but this has been increasing with the goal to deter online predators. Pakistan is the only country that doesn't seem to care. France, you're absolutely right, but but the age is increased because they have a Romeo and Juliet clause. And that is what I was saying, that the learned ASG said, that the court can look into specific cases and protect the minors, thereby satisfying the test that Abha was also saying. When we talk about United States, for example, the age varies from 16 to 18 years. 8 states say that the age is 17. 11 have set it at 18 years, right? When we talk about Australia, the age of consent has been raised to 17. And in many countries, consent rises to 18 if somebody is in a position of care or authority. So as you see, I'm sorry, again, Thailand, 18. In fact, Ireland 17, Turkey 18, Iraq 18, Vietnam 18, Bahrain 21. Sweden has also increased it. It's 15 years, rises to 18 if the potential offender is in some position of authority, etc.
Okay.
Having said that, these are also statistics before you. There is a reason why the age is being increased. That is also that as consent, as you said, consent should be there for educated, knowledgeable people. But you're talking about city life. What about villages?
What about villages? Okay, now that's the point you are repeating, and it is a pertinent point as well. Okay, Mr. Sankhla, let me go across to Ms. Abha Singh. Yes, you've made some really interesting points, and Abha Singh also wants to respond. It's an interesting debate that we are having. It's good to have two different views on this particular issue. So, Ms. Abha Singh, quick rebuttal.
You know, rural India, we are talking of again and again. Even now, we have so many child marriages in states like Bihar, Rajasthan. So there, the issue only doesn't come. They don't even implement the law. They get their rural India is still getting their children married at a very young age. So we cannot take the thing that because rural India, there is an issue, we have to not reduce it. Second issue is that most of our children are going to the Western countries to study. So when it's a global village now, why should we not have laws which are in parity with Western countries where most of the children are going to study? Let us forget Bahrain and countries like regressive countries where you may say 20 or whatever you say. No, you have to see. And again, my learned friend was saying that sex done by a person who's in authority, that can be the writer in the law. What we are talking of is a consensual sex between children who are studying together. That is what we are talking. This rider can always be there if you are lowering it to the age of 16, that if it is done by a person who's in a position of authority. In fact, in the definition of rape also, if you see, it says if it is done by a person in an authority, then it is death imprisonment. It is life imprisonment. Okay. That rider can always be there.
Okay. Okay. Now I have one question for both of you. We've discussed how legally, this is being perceived, what the arguments have been so far for and against. But I want to ask you, is Indian society, are Indian parents ready to accept consensual relationships amongst 16 and 18 years old? Let's begin with you, Mr. Sankhla, this time.
Well, again, as I said, if we tend to ignore villages, smaller towns, I won't be able to answer you. As far as cities are concerned, metropolitan cities are concerned, people are very progressive. Having said that, progress does not mean that we have an increase in child crime, pornography content, abortions, sexual diseases, pressurized sex, etc. And therefore, I would just conclude by saying there is no one-shoe-fit-all solution to this. A case-to-case approach is not only humane, it is proper, it is just and perhaps legal. Okay.
Ms. Abha Singh, closing comments. How will you like to respond to that specific question? Is Indian society ready for this?
You know, the amount of abortions and unwanted pregnancies that are happening in today's times, I think Indian society knows, the parent knows that the children are sexually active. And I think once we become open about it, we discuss it in sex education, at least these illegal abortions would stop. So many deaths that are happening, that would be put an end to. So Indian society should know what are the side effects.
All right. I'm completely out of time, but appreciate both of you. Ms. Abha Singh and Mr. Kapil Sankhla, thank you for joining us here on this debate. We'll, of course, be tracking this closely ahead as well. Thank you for joining us today.